Everybody, welcome back to Mike Drop Sports. I appreciate y'all for stopping through. I got a special guest tonight. What is up? Brien from Steelers Almighty. What's up, man? How are you?
I am good, man. I am glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, man, appreciate it. No doubt about it. All right, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the news where the Pittsburgh Steelers have been having some of these former players coming out talking a little bit of smack, one most notably being Ben Roethlisberger. I wouldn't say smack, I guess, but just having some talking points there. We're going to talk about that a little bit and what that means for the Pittsburgh Steelers, what that means with some of these former players coming out in terms of maybe free agency, in terms of retaining players, and much more with that. And we're going to just take some of your comments, questions, and concerns inside of the chat and let the conversation flow as it be here. So thank you for everybody for being in the chat. We'll get moving here and get going. To kick off the show, though, Brien, I wanted to talk about that. That's the big one. Everybody's talking about it, man. Ben Roethlisberger on Channel 7 on his podcast saying, hey, we were predictable then. I'd bring it up to some of the coaches. They would kind of just blow it off, talking about just how stale it was then. What do you think about his comments there when you just initially heard him?
I mean, he's right. That's the thing about it is it's not like he's making something up. I mean, they were stale. Ben had been around forever at that point, could probably call his own plays at that point in time and can run the offense himself. But, you can't be predictable. I say it all the time. Being a play caller and an offensive coordinator and putting a game plan and all that stuff together, you don't just say, okay, it's 1st and 10, we're going to call this. Okay, now it's 2nd and 6, oh, we're going to call this. No, you have to set things up and have 4 or 5, maybe even 10 different plays on formations, on this and that. I mean, you have to be able to be unpredictable, and that's the whole point. And that's what Ben's talking about. It's like if you just do the same thing, okay, it's 2nd and 6, oh, we're going to run a toss play. And if your tendency is to do that 65% of the time, well, you're pretty easy to prepare for. And that's kind of the whole thing. It was ridiculous. It's been ridiculous.
Yeah. Now that that's coming out, Brien, are you leaning more toward now this is a Tomlin problem as opposed to maybe an offensive coordinator problem? Do you think that that might be more of the issue, considering things have been status quo for a decade now? That's just making me wonder that. So I'm kind of curious of what you're thinking. Is this more of a Tomlin thing?
I think it's both. And the reason I say that, and now I'll lean more towards Tomlin because Tomlin is the one who hires these offensive coordinators. So, but I think it's a both. You hire these lame offensive coordinators. And look, Arthur Smith, the reason that he got fired in Atlanta is because he was a bad offensive coordinator, didn't use his weapons the right way. Well, okay, great. But Matt Canada was before that. And then it's on and on and on. So Mike Tomlin ultimately is the person that needs to be held responsible. But you know what? If the offensive coordinator has any backbone, they need to say, hey, coach, we need to be less predictable. I need to be able to call things my way. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. But if you think about it, look who the people that Tomlin has hired. Matt Canada. Who the hell was going to hire Matt Canada as offensive coordinator? Nobody.
No.
Arthur Smith had just gotten fired. There wasn't this big run out there to hire Arthur Smith to be an offensive coordinator. We just did that. So, again, I blame the offensive coordinators, but I blame Tomlin probably 75 to 80% of this because, again, he's got his thumb on everything.
Yeah, it definitely does. It does seem like a micromanaging, just that's what happens. Micromanagement over and over and over again. Like you said, yeah, people weren't beating down the door for some of these guys. They weren't making all these big calls. Hey, come in, come in, come in. They weren't doing that. But my question really truly is, I think once we're really getting through this, do you foresee change since all this is coming out, or do you think that that won't matter? And does this affect other situations, free agency, retaining players, perhaps? Does it have a trickle-down effect on that? Or is Mike Tomlin's, brand, Mike Tomlin's image, or the Steelers' brand big enough to overcome all of these things that are being brought out right now?
Well, it'll have an effect on who wants to come here to an extent. For instance, the wanting to play for Mike Tomlin thing, that's a real thing. I mean, you
Mhm.
talk to people at Senior Bowls or at the Combine, just everywhere. Guys want to play for Mike Tomlin. Now, once they get here and they get in and maybe the offense or whatever isn't going or the defense isn't going the way that they think that it could or should, that's a different deal. But then you're also talking about money. So if you're getting paid and the Steelers open up the checkbook, it is kind of what it is. So I don't think it's necessarily a deterrent, except I think what's more of a deterrent is not having a quarterback. As far as the
Yeah.
offense is concerned, that's more of a deterrent than maybe the play calling or the schemes. Because while coaching matters, clearly coaching matters.
Yes.
If you don't know who your quarterback is going to be, why would you sign there? And that's the whole thing. Like, it makes no sense to even get
Right.
in any kind of, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh. Well, who's the quarterback? Yeah, I don't know. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense.
That makes me wonder, though, too. Does this, now that you have a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, a future Hall of Famer, and I mean, things haven't been the same. I was watching Ben Roethlisberger highlights and just what he was able to do as a young player, and just how good he really was, and how, man, we kind of. I don't know. I feel like we should have valued a little bit more. Ben was one of a kind, in my opinion. I feel like some of his years were wasted, but that's neither here nor there. But does that bring Justin Fields to maybe a decision of saying, you know what, I don't know if this team has it together. Would he want to sign? And is that the only option the Steelers have, Justin Fields? Or would you be comfortable bringing Russ back?
I mean, I personally don't want Russ to come back. I think Russ served his purpose. He had his opportunity. Now we're hearing this clashing with Arthur Smith after a big game that Russ had. Didn't seem that he wanted Russ to be changing plays and took that away from him moving forward after the first Cincinnati game, which seems absolutely insane to
Yes.
me. Having
Yeah.
said all of that, I still look. It's not all. It wasn't all play calling. It wasn't that. Russ wasn't good over the last 6 games of the season. He
No.
just wasn't, and we needed him to be. And regardless of what plays were being called, there were still plenty of opportunities. It wasn't all the offensive line was bad. It wasn't all that the receivers bad. Now, it wasn't all Russ either. But there were plenty of times when guys are open, Russ not seeing it, not seeing the field, not forcing the ball to George Pickens like he should have. I'm just look. There's just so much more to an offense and what maybe the Steelers need that Russ just doesn't do. And I mean, for instance, one of our main weapons is a tight end. You got to throw it to him over the middle of the field. Russ didn't do that.
No.
So it's to me, it's time to move on.
I agree. And if you're the Steelers, do you want to stay with that same game plan? Do you want to stay in those heavier 12, 13 personnel sets? Do you want to try to be that team that just really is big, powerful, and trying to kick your ass like that way? Or do you want to be the team that's creative, like today's NFL? Some of the offenses are really ultra creative. They push the ball down the field. They try to beat you with speed. Or would you rather just stay with what the Steelers are trying to do? Do you think they're onto something there, or are they just kind of beating a dead horse with that? And should they maybe adapt and try to beat you with a little bit more speed and flexing the field a little bit more?
Well, I talked about this on Steelers Almighty the other day. Had a little town hall, and I talked about the Steelers don't have an identity on
Mm,
either side of the football. They don't have an identity. We act like we do, but we
yes.
don't. So I mean, do you want to be a smash mouth team? Okay, well then go get smash mouth pieces. You know, the offensive line should have been the first thing that you did. Now they're trying to fix it, but you have to go all in. You can't just pity pat around with it. You have to go fix the line. And then the same thing with the defense. Go stop the run if that's what you're trying to be. So you can do that. But the Steelers first have to figure out what they want to do, then go get the pieces. I look at it like this, and I equated it to Philadelphia and the Chiefs. Is like Philadelphia wants to run the football.
Yeah.
They have a great offensive line, probably the best in the National Football League. They have one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the league. In my opinion, he's the
Yes.
best. And they run the football. They also have a quarterback that can run the football.
Mm-hmm.
However, they also happen to have two of the top 20 receivers in the National Football League as well at their disposal. So if you want to bring that extra safety down, to stop the run, we will throw the football on you. Detroit kind of does the same thing. It's like, yeah, our offensive line is great and we'll get physical, but both of them seem to have offensive play callers that are innovative, do a lot, especially Ben Johnson. Now he's in Chicago, do a
Yes.
lot of different things, a lot of different formations. It's not just, okay, we're going to run the ball 65% of the time because we just want to do that. Well, yeah, we can, but we're going to do a lot of different things off of that too. I don't
Right.
think you can just line up today in today's NFL and say, well, we're just going to run it and run it down your throat. I don't think you can do that.
No.
You got to be more innovative than that, but they do have to get some sort of identity. You can have the identity of running the ball, but also do a lot of different things off of that. Same thing on defense. You can have an identity of stopping the run, but
Mm-hmm.
then do a lot of different things off of that. And that's something that they need to start doing because, again, not having an identity, and I say this all the time, it's like mediocrity. It's like the death of your franchise. If you don't know what you are, how can you be good? And that's where the Steelers are.
They are. Yeah, definitely. Couldn't have said it better. No doubt about it. That was definitely a good way to sum it up. And that's the thing. I think that they lack that balance. And I think that that's what it all boils down to. Like you said, running the football, pounding it, but doing other things off of it, being good in a little bit of everything. Don't limit
Yeah.
yourself and paint yourself into a corner. And that's where I feel like maybe that they are. They've painted themselves into a corner. They lack creativity and they just lack that balance. And I think that that may be what is missing, no doubt about it. All right, guys, we appreciate you guys in the chat. We appreciate you so very much. Make sure you're hitting that like button. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already, sharing the show. We appreciate it. We do this to where there was no ads in it, so you could get more of us talking, and we'll try to keep it that way. So make sure you're smashing that like button for us. I seen one comment in there. Building, it's all about building a sustainable program from Tim Manto. I don't think that what they're doing is sustainable. I just don't. I don't think so. Yeah, I seen that, and that was like something that it like struck a nerve with me a little bit. Not that his comment, but I just don't think what they're doing is sustainable. But I see a lot of comments in there, Brian. People talking about trade for a quarterback, go get a quarterback. Are you
Mm-mm.
okay if Justin doesn't sign, Russ doesn't sign, going out there and maybe getting one of those mid-range quarterbacks, a third or fourth round guy? And do you think the Steelers could potentially have success with that? Or is this kind of like a wash this year? I know we would talked about it a couple shows ago whenever I was over at your place, but talk about that here tonight. Just what the Steelers possibly could or couldn't do if they, don't land a Justin Fields, don't get a Russell Wilson, and what maybe a rookie quarterback would mean and what that would mean maybe for the future, maybe even 2026.
The thing is, if Russ and Justin Fields don't sign, the Steelers are in trouble.
Big.
I can tell you that right this very second. They are in trouble. This quarterback class is not a class that you would say that you're going to hang your hat on and say, oh, you know what? This is a future starter. This is a future
Mm-hmm.
Pro Bowl guy. Now, is there going to be somebody that we don't suspect that's probably going to be pretty good down the road? Of course, because there isn't every single draft. I mean, it's if it was an exact science, everybody'd be 100% at it.
Yes.
But they're not. So, but this is not a deep quarterback draft where we can go and say, oh, we need to do this. Here's the thing. Quarterback is clearly the most important position on the Pittsburgh Steelers on any football team, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But I see in the comments people are saying like take Will Howard in the third or fourth round.
Yes.
Are the
That's what I was talking
Steelers
about.
a third or fourth round quarterback away from winning? The answer to that is no. So why would you waste a third or a fourth round pick on Will Howard versus possibly getting a running back that could start for you for the next 4 or 5 years? Because this running back class is super deep. Or another wide receiver that could start for you for another 4 or 5 years versus a Will Howard that at best And again, who knows what anybody's going to be? But
Right.
the projection for Will Howard is a career backup. Why would you waste a third or fourth round pick on that? You wouldn't. It doesn't make sense to do that.
But what do you think? If you don't get them, and like you said, they're in trouble for sure. And I agree with that 1000%. That is going to be massively detrimental to this franchise. It could possibly really set them up for catastrophic failure. Maybe it puts you in a good draft position for 2026. But what would you do if you're Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan? You're not able to get a couple of these guys that you had. What would you do? Kyle Allen? I just don't know. Do you have any options other than in the draft amongst free agency or possible trades that maybe you could even do? Or do you think it'd be pointless to even trade for somebody?
I don't think you trade because, again, the Steelers aren't a quarterback away from winning a Super
Right.
Bowl. So I don't think you give up players or potential players with draft picks. But there are plenty of quarterbacks that are available. Now, are they viable? No, like a Zach Wilson, Jacoby Brissett. I mean, there's guys that are going to be available, a Daniel Jones, but do you want those guys, to be your quarterback? So the answer would be no, you don't want to trade to go get somebody because, again, the Steelers need able bodies.
Right.
Depending on how the draft goes, at where we're picking in the first round, if we could move back 2 or 3 spots to pick up a second or a third round pick, the Steelers should do that because they need people. They need the ability, or they need the, I guess, availability of more able bodies. The potential to draft eligible players to make their team good. That's what they need access to. This is not the year to put all in for a quarterback. Free agency is not there. The draft is not there. So it's more than just, okay, let's just trade up or let's trade for a guy. You don't want to do that if you're in the Steelers position right now. If you can't sign one of those two people, then just go figure something out with somebody else because it behooves you to give up draft capital for this draft class at quarterback. That wouldn't, or a free agent by any means. Just go sign a free agent is what they should do.
Amen. Amen. All right, guys, make sure you're hitting that like button. We're going to continue on. We're going to dive into some of your chat questions again. We are getting into it a little bit there. We'll kind of let you guys drive the conversation a little bit, but again, share, like, all that good stuff. If there's something specific you want to ask Brien, something you want to ask me, make sure you throw it in there, and we will do our best to get to everything we can. Um, what do you think here? I've been seeing it in the chat, and I wanted to ask this too. And I don't know if we talked about it before, but Naji Harris, do you think it's a guy, or do you think he's a guy the Steelers are going to go out there and try to bring back? Or do you think they're going to go out there and draft somebody? You hear all the big names, the Genty and all that kind of stuff. Do you think the Steelers are going to lean more toward the draft, more toward Jaylen Warren, or kind of an undrafted guy? But does Najee Harris have any prayer of making it back to the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025?
I mean, there's always that chance. But here's the thing to keep in mind is that the free agent running back market is horrific. Like, literally, Najee is the best guy with his age, his size, his durability. Like, he's the best free agent running back. I know you're going to see a bunch of stuff as far as like Adam Jones. I'm like, but he's 33 years old. I'm like, or not Adam Jones, but Aaron Jones.
Yes.
But so no, Najee is literally the number one free agent running back out there. So since that's the case, and Najee's not horrible, are you really wanting to pay Najee anywhere between $9 and $11 million a year? I would say the answer to that is absolutely not. So since it isn't, I don't think the Steelers are going to bring him back, especially when they wouldn't bring him back for 1 year at 6.7. They said no to that. So why would they go to 9? I mean, you got to draft somebody. You're going to need to. The draft is deep. You might as well go to that well and then still have money to fill other holes versus paying Najee $11 million. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yes. And here I have to ask this question because I just don't think that it's impressive. It doesn't impress me. Now, the amount of years that Najee did this, I think maybe impressive a little bit because I don't think it's been something that's been done a bunch. But In a 17-game season now, averaging around 1,000 yards a year, does that impress you in today's NFL, or do you consider that to maybe be just average and subpar, or do you think like most of the fans and say that's crazy, that's hitting it out of the park?
Yeah, the fans are wrong. They got to readjust their numbers because 17 games is like 58 yards a game. I mean,
Yes.
what do you want 58 yards a game out of your starting running back that you're going to pay $11 million to? Come on. No,
No.
no,
No.
that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I've been screaming that for a while on my channel, and people get it. They're like, "No, you're right," and it's not that I'm right. I just throw the numbers out there. I'm like, do you want your starting running back to get you 58 yards a game? Well, no. The answer to that
Amen.
is no. And again, Najee he's durable. He
Yeah.
doesn't fumble. He's fine, but that's just not the guy. He's not a game breaker or a difference
Exactly.
maker, should I say? You don't always have to be the fastest guy out there. I'm not saying that, but you've got to be a difference maker. And Najee's not a difference maker. Like you don't say, "Hey, we got Naji Harris on our team. That's going to get us an extra 2 wins this year because he's on our team." You're not saying that about Naji Harris. Solid, but not a difference maker.
And the Steelers, you just brought up something there. And again, guys, we'll get back to the chat. So make sure you're hitting that like button. But I wanted to ask this when you said, a difference maker, a guy that could win you one or two more games. Do the Pittsburgh Steelers possess any player offensively that you can say that preseason and really be confident and say, hey, this guy's going to get us a couple dubs this year. He's a real difference maker. Do they have a player like that currently on this roster?
George Pickens. And George Pickens is crazy. Don't get me wrong. He's got an attitude issue. But part of George Pickens is smarter than what you think. And what I say by that, or why I say that, is because Pickens understood he had nobody to challenge him in the wide receiver room as far as competition wise. There was nobody there that you could say, you know what? If you act up, we'll just start throwing this guy the ball and we can still win without you. There was nobody on the other side or even in that entire room that you could do that with. Last year, look, Deontay Johnson, I'm not saying it was a bad move to get rid of him because 3 other teams decided to get rid of him too in the
Yes.
same year. So I'm
Yep.
not saying it was a bad move, but Pickens understood that Deontay, number one, was a much better route runner than him. And 2, he got open and they threw him the ball and he caught the football.
Right.
Well, Pickens this year didn't have that competition, and I think he needs to be challenged. That's why I think it's important that the Steelers not only bring in a free agent, they also draft a guy high in this draft to challenge Pickens and say, look, we want you here. We think you can be a difference maker. But if not, we've got these other guys. And I think that will up his level of play. It's going to do one of two things, Jason. It's either going to up his level or it's
Right.
going to say, you know what, we don't need you. We'll get you out of here.
Here's my thing too, and when we're talking about now that we're in the wide receiver room, I wanted to know this from you too. Do you think Calvin Austin's that guy? Do you think he'll be able to take that leap next year to really challenge for the, lion's share of, reps to compete with George in that category, like being a guy that's going to be a possession type receiver, a guy that's going to get open, be able to run those routes effectively and efficiently? Is Calvin Austin that next guy coming up? Or is it going to have to be somebody else? Or is just Calvin going to be that 3, 4 for the rest of his career?
Calvin's a 3. Let's just keep it real. That's what he is. Having said that, the Steelers don't use him correctly.
No.
That so many shallow crosses that they don't run that they could run with him. Quick outs that they don't run. Quick slants that they don't
Yeah.
run. It seemed like, they tried to throw it deep down the middle of the field, which I understand that. I'm not saying he can't do that. But there are so many other things to the route tree that Calvin Austin can do that we just never took advantage of.
Exactly.
Like I said, crossers, screens, just so much that he could do. He's not a conventional number 2 wide receiver, but that's fine. He doesn't have to be. He's a slot guy. He can play in
Right.
the slot and let him do that. But he can get open. That's the thing that I do know about him. He can get open. He catches the football when you throw it to him. But do you want him to be your main number two? The answer would be no.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that he's not capable of making plays for you. You
Yes.
would want him to have anywhere between, I would say, 35 and 50 catches a year, somewhere in that neighborhood,
Right.
if you're doing it right.
Yeah, and a big game here or there. Yeah, I hear you
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Here's another question that I have about this offense, and I'd love to have your perspective on this also. I've given the viewers here of my perspective on this, but I wanted to know what you think about this offense in terms of pre-snap movements, pre-snap shifts, motions, things of that nature. Do you think they utilize them enough, or do you think they utilize them correctly? Because I feel as though they're not using that pre-snap movement to create the mismatches that are needed for a professional offense to be successful. And I don't know if it's just me and bringing my fan emotion into it, or if this is something that others are seeing also. Do you think that maybe that's something they're lacking in here?
Well, first off, your fan emotion. We're all fans, brother, so we get it, man. We're all crazy. But
Yeah,
the thing about it is they use it. You saw them do it, but it was like early shifts and kind of, just a tiny bit of motion to see whether they're in man coverage or not. There wasn't a whole lot of, okay, we line up in one formation. We're going to shift to totally different and move two or three guys around to see the
right.
defense move and maybe shift or motion a guy back across the formation. It was always, if I'm on the right, maybe I run out a little bit to the right, kind of a sugar motion, or a little bit inside, like I said, like a little sugar motion, but
Yeah,
not anything sustainable. And so I think they got to do more of that,
I agree.
shifting. But part of that is, Jason, setting up plays so you get the calls out quicker so the
Right.
guys can get to the line of scrimmage so we can line up in a formation. Okay, with 20 seconds left, then we're shifting to something totally different, making the defense think, then be able to motion across or come back, whatever it is. You got to be able to do that kind of stuff. They don't do that enough, but is that even in Arthur Smith's offense?
Yeah, makes you wonder for sure. But no, yeah, I was just curious with that because I thought, like, man, are you crazy? Are you bringing your fandom into it? But it just seems like they're not doing that. Yeah, like you're saying, moving it, starting out on one side, going to the other, coming back again, making it different, just making it exciting. And I think that that's where I think we're all kind of stuck as a fan, just not enjoying what we're seeing out there for the last decade. I saw one comment in here from Tim Manto, and he's calling this a long term rebuild. Are the Steelers in that long term rebuild? And have they been in that rebuild for quite some time? Maybe even perhaps before the departure of Ben Roethlisberger when he retired.
Um, let's see. I, I think we're in a rebuild. I think we've been in a rebuild, but the Steelers just don't want to say it, and they don't go all into it. Like they haven't went all the way over. They keep trying to plug a dam, and we talked about this last night on Big Show. Just plugging a dam, just putting a band-aid over something versus just addressing the problem, like cornerback. We brought in Patrick Peterson 2 years ago. Patrick Peterson was finished the year before. We bring him in. He's absolutely done when he gets to the Steelers. Or this past year, Dante Jackson. I mean, he was average at best, versus just saying, you know what, we need to fix the cornerback problem opposite Joey Porter Jr. Just go get a guy and make him be the guy, and it's that kind of stuff. They're trying to fix the offensive line. But are you going to go out there and pay a high money guard and go really do it to fix the offensive line? We still don't have a quarterback. We tried with Kenny Pickett, but I think anybody that knew anything about football knew that the Steelers were reaching and they didn't need to reach. So
Exactly.
I just, as far as that's concerned. So, um, yeah, we're in a rebuild mode. We've been in it, but they just won't commit to it. And committing to that means losing seasons. And that's the whole thing is that when you're committing to a rebuild, you trade away guys, you get rid of stuff, and you go all in to rebuild the entire roster. You don't pay a defense $160 million
Right.
and then try to say that you're rebuilding. That it just doesn't work.
No doubt. Here's a great comment, I think, from Entanglement Shiva. He or she says, "Look, guys, Bill Cowher only got one Super Bowl, and then Mike T won it with close to the same team. Maybe it's taking the same amount of time for Mike T to do it again. Kind of makes sense. Does that kind of make sense to you? Do you think it is kind of taking Mike just a little bit longer to get this team going again? And what was Bill here like 15 years or something like that? And does that make sense to you? And maybe we're overreacting a little bit since that team departed. It's taken quite a while to get this thing going again."
I mean, that's a valid point.
Hmm.
People act like, and it's revisionist history. They think that everything that Bill Cowher touched was gold, and
No, it
that
wasn't.
is absolutely not the truth.
Mm-mm.
Everything that he did wasn't spectacular. I do know that he went to a Super Bowl though with Neil O'Donnell,
Yes,
so as your quarterback. So he did do that. So you got to give him credit there. But everything that Cowher did wasn't just oh, he became the coach and the Steelers were the best team in the AFC. That wasn't the case.
right.
But it did take him a while. It did take him a while to actually win a Super Bowl. But now we're at the point to where the Steelers aren't even being competitive in playoff games. And
Yeah.
that wasn't the case with Bill Cowher.
Mm.
I'm not saying that they didn't have a losing season because they did. I'm not saying that they weren't bad some years because they were. But they won playoff games. Like when they got into the playoffs, they were winning games. Now we're to the
Hmm.
point where we're not even competing in games, and something's got to change, and it's got to change quickly. But if you really look at it, the Steelers didn't win a Super Bowl until Bill Cowher got a quarterback. Now, Big Ben was, super raw. They didn't let
Yes,
him do a lot. They leaned on the running game and the defense. But Ben made a play here or there when you needed him to make a play. But
right.
the Steelers don't have a quarterback yet, so we'll see.
Yeah, and that's what Mark Malone says here. Beer Mall's also commenting in kind of the same area here, saying, how many AFC championship games did Cowher go to without a quarterback? I remember lots of heartbreaking losses with the Cordell Stewarts, with Neil O'Donnell making it to the Super
Mm-hmm.
Bowl. But, the Tommy Maddox, all those guys that, ran through Pittsburgh. But is that where maybe Bill Cowher was a little bit better than Mike? Or doesn't really not matter because just the way it worked out. Mike Tomlin had a lot of time with Ben Roethlisberger and wasn't able to, really capitalize other than the two Super Bowl appearances. Or is it, once you start paying the quarterback so much damn money, you're kind of asked out. You got to kind of rebuild. I don't know, but is that where Cowher maybe is a little bit better than Mike? Is maybe doing a little bit more with a little bit less?
I wouldn't say that because Mike Tomlin won 8 games with a guy named Duck as his
Yeah,
quarterback.
yeah,
So
true.
I wouldn't say that at all. I would just say that the team was better under
Right.
Bill Cowher. Think of the team that they have. I think it was just better. The offensive players were better. Now, the problem that you go back to is you think about the killer bees that Mike Tomlin had with Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown. You could even throw Martavius Bryant in there or Juju. I mean, the Steelers had crazy offensive weapons. They just didn't have a defense that could stop anybody at the
No.
time, which people will say, well, Mike Tomlin's a defensive guy. Well, you can be a defensive guy all you want. If you don't have any good players that can do anything, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, So that's part of all of this. But I don't know if Cowher was necessarily better or did more with less. Let me say that. I think Cowher was probably a better coach than Mike Tomlin. That's not a knock at Mike Tomlin.
No.
People always think that if you say somebody's better, that you're saying the other person had.
Right.
That's for some reason that's the society that we live in these days.
Right.
I think Cowher was better, but I think Tomlin actually did more with less because, like I said, there was no quarterback at any time that Bill Cowher had that was as bad as Duck Hodges. And Mike
No.
Tomlin somehow won 8. Now, not that 8 games means anything to me because I am over the 500
Right.
record, never losing season. I'm past that.
Right.
But it happened. And you can't tell me I don't know if there's 2 or 3 coaches in the history of football that is doing that with Duck Hodges as a QB.
No, and every Steeler fan too, I think, Brian, really maybe gets a little bit off track with some of the stuff. I'm not a big Mike Tomlin fan. Does he do some things well? Absolutely. Is he a bad coach? I'll say no. I think he's a good coach. I just don't think he's elite coach. I thought Bill Cowher was good, and I think he had moments of being an elite guy, but he was relatively just good most of the time. You even look at Chuck Noll, but we're entirely different eras of football, entirely different role packages, entirely different skill sets of players, sizes, speed, all that. And I think maybe that's where we all get confused. And I think it's really hard to compare Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin to each other. I think it's kind of unfair, maybe, but it is what it is. But do you think the Rooneys do the right thing, Brian? Do you think that their loyalty is the right move, or do you think they're maybe slightly a little bit over loyal in trying to keep guys at the head coaching job a little bit too long, maybe, or do you think that they do it the right way?
Well, I mean, look, the Steelers have been an organization that has been successful forever. So, staying loyal can work, but at the same time, you got to demand some excellence. I can be loyal to you, but I demand certain things from you as well. And Art Rooney said it last year. It's time to start winning. Well,
Right.
what did start winning mean? And I don't think anybody asked that question. Does winning mean, hey, we won 10 games? That's winning enough? Or does winning mean you got to start winning some playoff games? I think fans and most people would say, no, that means we got to start winning some playoff games. Well, if that's the case, the Steelers didn't do that, and Art Rooney II's got to start holding Mike Tomlin accountable for that. Look, if you want to keep the coach, fine, you keep the coach, but you say you got to get a different offense and defensive coordinator in here, and you got to let those guys run things their way. You
No
can't
doubt.
have your thumb on them, making them do it your way. No. We're going to bring these guys in, and we're going to let them do it their way. That's why a lot of people don't want to coach under Mike Tomlin, because they know when they come here, they got to do it his way. Well, why do I want to do it his way? You brought me here for a reason. If it isn't to do it my way, why would I come?
That's
So,
it. Yeah, I agree, man. Yeah, but why would you? Sean, what's up, Sean? Epic Expeditions. Good to see you, man. He says Bruce Arians was an amazing offensive coordinator. Also, I thought Bruce did a really good job. I kind of like that more. I like the run game. I like beating people up. I like being physical. I even do that with my youth teams I coach. I want them to be physical, but I realized at some point of the season, even this year, when you don't have the personnel, like you said, sometimes you can't get that done. And I had to spread things out and utilize the personnel that we had. But that kind of reflects to the Steelers for me a little bit here. Um, the Steelers don't have some of the personnel to do some of the things that they want to do. But I wanted to ask you about the offensive line since we've been on all this topic here and all these coaches and different teams and skill sets. This offensive line, is it moving in the right direction? Because I think that they're going to have a good offensive line here in a year or two, because I think that there's a lot of young talent there. But do you think they're moving in the right direction? I could say, like, I could agree with you. I think they need a guard, for an Isaac Sumalu spot or something of that nature. But do you think they're on the right path and they've made the right moves here over the last couple seasons using high value draft capital with Faetanu and Broderick Jones?
yeah, well, here's the thing is, first off, I'll start with Broderick Jones. Everybody just assumes that Broderick Jones is going to be fixed by moving to the left side. I don't believe that. It's not that he can't be. It's not that he won't be better. But if you're not saying that Broderick Jones didn't take a big step back from last year to this year, you're lying to yourself. But you could just watch it. And he was a rookie last year. That's the thing. He was a rookie last year and played better than he did this season when he started the entire season for the Steelers. So it was worse. And you could say, well, he's a left tackle, but he played fine last year. So what was the excuse? So I mean, you can't just say flipping him over to the left tackle is going to make him good. I think he
No.
can be, but yeah, it's going to take some work. Faetanu, I think is going to be fine. He's just got to stay healthy. He's got to
Yes.
stay healthy. I think the Steelers can have a good offensive line, because If Jones is okay, I feel like Faetanu, because the one game that he played, he handled the Broncos defensive ends that were really, really good. He handled both of them. I feel like Zach Frazier is already really good. Isaac Siamala, he's only 31. Maybe you re-up him. I don't think you have to get rid of a 31-year-old. It'd be one thing if he was 35 or something like that. His contract's up next year. He'll be 32. I think you can sign him for another 2 years if he wants to keep playing football. I think you can do that. And then at right guard, you bring back James Daniels. You probably get him cheaper because he got hurt. McCormick shouldn't have played this year. He wasn't supposed to, but he was forced into it. Did an admirable job because his motor is crazy, but his technique was horrific. But you get working on it. And, a guy that's got 14 starts in the National Football League all of a sudden is your backup as a 2-year player. You don't get that very often. So they've got the potential. They've got the potential to be good. They've made the investment. I'm not sure they have the right coach, Pat Meyer. I'm not a big Pat Meyer fan at all. But we'll see. We'll see. But the potential, Jason, is definitely there, my man.
I agree. I got to agree with you. I think that potential's there. I think they went in the right direction, no doubt about it. Super chat from Beer Malls, Dick LeBeau, the Godfather. Yeah, we missed that. We missed that high intensity blitzing and all that kind of stuff. But we did talk about that on the show over on your channel, Steelers Almighty. If you haven't checked that out, guys, make sure you go support Brien over there. But we talked about that where, I think Nick brought it up that Terrell Austin was a guy from a blitzing style background, a guy that's a high-paced defensive type guy that likes to bring people, likes to keep the pressure on offenses. Do you think the Steelers have gotten just too far away from that? And do you think that maybe they can get back to it? And do you think maybe also that Mike Tomlin being more of a 4-3 guy kind of contributes to some of this too? Or do you think it's lack of personnel? What do you think it is?
Nah, well, I think first off, people were trying to force the Steelers into being a championship defense last year when we weren't. Trying to just say that we're a championship defense. We didn't have championship corners. And you've never heard of a championship defense or somebody that you're saying is such a great defense that's got average corners. You've just never heard that. And the Steelers had that. So that's number one.
Right.
But this is a Mike Tomlin defense. I think we've got enough personnel to be good. We just don't do enough. Like we have no imagination. We don't blitz. We don't zone blitz. It's cover 2, cover 3. Occasionally it's man. We don't twist. We don't stunt. We don't do any of those things. It's just, hey, line up, beat your guy. And if you can, great. And hopefully you get there and we can cause a turnover. But we don't do anything innovative. And it's all vanilla. Offenses are too good.
Yes.
They're just too good to just sit there and not do anything. It's disheartening because I think they have the personnel to do a lot more. We just don't do a lot more.
Oh, yeah. I was up at training camp, and I could see the sideline to sideline speed, the way they could attack the football, and it just felt like that went by the wayside. But Jamie D puts in a comment, don't hire people to tell them what to do. I hire good people to tell me what to do. That's a quote from Steve Jobs. Is that it? Is Mike Tomlin just micromanaging so many things that maybe some of this has just fell by the wayside and he just maybe doesn't have enough time or effort? I don't know. Like, what? This is Tomlin's defense, like you said, and it's so disheartening. It just makes you want to rip your hair out when you got the best defender on the planet on your defense. But what fixes this defense now that we've shifted over to this side of the football? What fixes this defense for 2025? What is a must-have that the Steelers have to get done this free agency, draft period, what have you? What's the number one thing on the agenda to make this defense better?
You got to get a nose tackle. You got to get a run stopper. And look, I know I've bitched and moaned about having a cornerback, and the Steelers do need to have that. They got to address it. They can't keep plugging with one guy he's a one-year wonder and hope that he can do the job. They've got to address corner. But before they do any of that, they got to get a nose tackle, a guy that can eat up 2 blockers, because Keanu Benton, they're trying to force him into a position that that's not his job. That's not his position. He is not a nose tackle. Number one, he doesn't have the weight for it. and he's not that good at it. I mean, he's 305 pounds. You
Right.
can't have a nose tackle at 305 pounds. Those guys got to be 340 plus.
Yes.
So you got to go find guys that can go do that. They're out there. The Steelers just have to go get them. They got to be willing to pay somebody that
Right.
and actually bring them in. But yeah, that's the first thing that they have to do, because the teams in your division, they run the football. Like the Ravens are the best team in the division. They run the football. Even the Bengals, who throw it all over the lot, they also run the football. And that's the
Yes.
thing. Teams that are successful still run the football. So you have to stop that and try to make teams one-dimensional. So nose tackle is number one as far as defense is concerned. That's the number
Right.
one spot that they gotta attack, is
I agree.
find a nose tackle.
I agree. Now, when you're looking at the back end, because I agree with you, Brian, the nose tackle is the most important thing for me. I think you can get that done inside of the draft and a deep, deep draft in the defensive front category. I think you could get it done some way, somehow. I don't think that that's absolutely too difficult to do. But now, when we shift maybe to the back end, are you looking at guys like a Minka Fitzpatrick? Maybe you could dangle him as some trade bait. Maybe he still has some value. Maybe you go out there, but would you like to see the Steelers maybe get younger, bigger, maybe more physical, or maybe, taller, more speedy, younger in that aspect? What would you like to see on that back end of the Steelers defense to be successful here moving forward?
I mean, I don't think they need to get younger or more physical. I think that part is fine.
Mhm.
Um, the thing is that you can't, like, Minka had a bad year because of what they were asking Minka to do. Now, I'm not sure that he could do anything else because we didn't see him make any splash plays or anything, but they were asking Minka to be the last line of defense, which, okay,
Yes.
fine. So sometimes the last line of defense, they're not going to do a whole lot, but you can't pay that guy $18 million. That's where
Yes.
the difference is that if you're going to ask this guy to be the last line of defense, make sure everybody gets lined up in the same spot, communication, which how many times do we see communication breakdowns back there?
Yes.
So if you're asking a guy to do all of that, then why do you need to pay him $18 million? You can find somebody to do that for $3, or you
I
can
agree.
draft a guy to be able to get people lined up and be the last line of defense. You don't need an $18 million safety valve on your defense. That doesn't do
Yes.
you any good. So, I mean, Minka's fine. You just tell him, look, you got to take a pay cut or we got to cut you. It's just that simple. I wouldn't, because if you trade him, you got to trade him after June 1st to get the full value. And if it's after June 1st, obviously
Right.
that's after the draft. So the trade value comes in 2026. So you don't want to do that. You just say, hey, Minka, we love you. We want you here. You have to take a pay cut. There's no way we can pay you $18 million to do what you did again. It just doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. No doubt, man. No doubt. Thank you, everybody. See all the love in the chat. We appreciate you guys. Thank you so very much. Make sure you're hitting that like button, doing all that. I didn't realize how fast 48 minutes, almost 50 minutes has went. So I want to start winding things down here. I appreciate Brian giving us his time. That's very, very valuable. I appreciate that so much. And again, guys, make sure you go check him out if you haven't already over on Steelers Almighty. But shifting gears here, just trying to wind down the show. Um, in terms of free agency, what are some must keeps for the Steelers? Who do they need to keep uh, in terms of their free agents that are going to be available? Which players are you making their number one priority if you're Omar Khan in this football team?
Well, first off, I'll start at the most important position. I think you got to keep Justin Fields.
Yes.
Look, I know a lot of people don't like him, but if we're all being honest about it, he wasn't given the reins or the keys to do everything that maybe he could possibly do. So you got to start there and bring back some familiarity. You bring back Fields. I think you got to bring back James Daniels at guard and maybe create some competition there. You bring him back, unless you can go find another big name guard, Jason. If you can do that, then
Yes.
okay. But if not, then I think you bring back James Daniels. One that goes underrated, I think Elandon Roberts is another guy at linebacker that the
Love
Steelers
him.
have to sign back. Look, he's not the greatest in coverage. Obviously, he's a better 3-4 middle linebacker, even though we're not in it very much.
Right.
Having said all that, I think Landon Roberts is somebody that you have to bring back that's currently a Steelers free agent that you need to bring back. Depth pieces as well, but those would be the main guys for me that you need to focus in on and bring back. No Naji, I'm sorry. You don't need to bring Naji. No Russell Wilson. You don't need to bring him back. And for God's sake, you don't need to bring back Dan Moore Jr.
Amen, man. I agree. What happened to him, dude? How do you fall off a cliff like that? You brought it up when we were doing the show last time. Like, that has to be, and I thought about it afterwards. That does have to be one of the most monumental collapses by a tackle in the league ever. Like, he went from playing pretty damn well. I thought he was the best offensive player at one point for the Steelers, and then boom. Do you think he was hurt or something? How do you do that?
I don't know, but here's what I do know. Dan Moore probably cost himself $20 to $30 million that last 8 games of the season because Dan Moore was playing outstanding football. I shouldn't say outstanding. That's an overreach. He was playing good football the first 9 games of the year. He just was. That you can't deny, not you, but nobody can deny that he wasn't playing good football. Mm-hmm. And then week 11 hit, and it was like, yeah, I don't know how to play. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, to give up 10 sacks in that time frame is unbelievable. But he did it. 4 games over the last, I think it was week 11, 12, 16, and 17. He gave up 2 sacks each in those games. Just unbelievable.
They had anybody else, he's sitting the bench, baby. He's down.
Yeah, but they didn't have him there, right? They didn't.
That's it. No doubt about it. All right, guys, we're going to start wrapping it up because my camera is about to die. So I don't want it to die while we're in mid-sentence here. So, Brien, tell us a little bit. Again, thank you for joining me, man. I truly appreciate that. We usually go for about an hour. So we're about to that time. But I want you to tell everybody exactly where they can find all of your stuff, what you got going on out there. Again, guys, he's got really good stuff, so make sure you check him out. So, Brien, let everybody know a little bit about where to find you if they haven't found you already.
Absolutely. We are obviously on YouTube. Make sure you go. It's at youtube.com/Steelers Almighty. You can find us there. Anywhere you get social media, we're there as well. We don't do a ton on Twitter right now. It takes a lot to do that, man. It takes a lot to be on Twitter, having Twitter fingers all day long. But we're out there. In podcasts, anywhere that you get a podcast, you can find us. But mainly we are at YouTube. We got a lot of stuff coming out here in the next, I would say the next couple of weeks as far as off-season stuff, where the Steelers need to be, all that good stuff. Free agents, kind of what we talked about today, who we should keep, who we should go. We got a series called My Position, by Position that's going to be coming out here pretty quickly. So make sure you go check it out. Steelers Almighty on YouTube. We got a lot of things over there. We also got memberships to sign up for to get a lot of content on that as well. So appreciate the love. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Hey, man, anytime. Hopefully we'll do more stuff. And as I tried to explain to people too, they want everybody to always collab. I said, you got to collab a few times. That's when you start to get more comfortable. The conversations become better. So I appreciate having more than one conversation with you. It starts to really flow a lot better, starts to be really cool. And I appreciate that. And also, again, guys, make sure you are supporting Brien. Make sure you're supporting Steelers Almighty. And thank you for supporting us. Brien, ours will cut off here after there's no backstage. So, again, I just wanted to thank you. Appreciate you. And again, hey, it sounds like a lot of people are going over and giving you a sub. So that's cool.
I know. I appreciate it, man.
Hell yeah. We love it.
Thank you guys, man.
Yes. So thank you again, bro. Thank you. And we're going to wrap it up. And again, everybody, make sure you subscribe here at Mike Drop Sports to Steelers Almighty also. And hopefully we'll continue to do big things for you guys and bring you a lot more fun stuff each and every day. So thank you, man. We'll see you.
All right, man.
Thanks, man. See you guys. Appreciate it.